When you look at these numbers in particular, what I would say if they were asked me for strategic help, which they're not
Yeah.
because they're French and I'm not,
And
I
they
would
would
say,
ask me, not you,
right,
get
exactly.
a
Well, then you
fighter,
should tell
man.
them go hard in
Yeah.
Asia and Africa. Welcome back to the Media Odyssey podcast. That is Marion Ranchet.
And this is Evan Shapiro.
And this week we brought case studies to talk about. We each brought a company that we wanted to study on the pod that we were fascinated by. And I think it's kind of obvious. In Marion's case, it is from her home country. And in my case, it comes from my work history. So, Marion, let's go with young age before beauty.
Okay, cool.
Does that make sense? That's a cheat. I called myself beautiful and you young. So
Yeah, I'll take it.
so we each brought our own company to do a case study on one that we're fascinated and that we study. And with Marion, it is from your home country. It is, let me see if I can say this correctly, Canal Plus.
Nice. Very
Uh,
cute.
all
Very
right.
cute.
Uh,
So this is the first plus. Let me say this because this
well,
company.
first, don't you like our QR code here that you can use to
Oh
subscribe to the
yeah,
podcast?
nice. That looks nice. Yeah,
Yeah.
do use it, guys.
Okay.
Canal Plus is the first plus ever. The company was started 40 years ago. They actually like to say they're the first plus, and they actually sued a few folks, including Disney, when they launched in France with the plus.
That's right. I remember that.
Yeah, they really don't like that. They are the first plus. So the reason why I wanted to talk about Canal Plus is a lot happened for them in 2024. So at a high level, if we look at subs, I think it's very interesting to see in this day and age a company that is available not just in France. So it's a French company, it's a French group, but these guys operate in 52 markets directly,
Wow.
and then they have business as part of the wider Canal Plus group in close to 200 markets. So
Wow.
it's a French company, but it's not
It's
just
truly
you know
global. Yeah.
Exactly. It's a French global player. And so what I think is interesting is that it's tiny, but there's still a bit of growth, right? So if you look at the subscriber number versus the US, where, last year wasn't as bad. But I think you guys dropped by 6.3 million subs, if I'm not mistaken.
So what you're saying is this actually is a growth in pay TV when at the same time in the United States, pay TV, you're
Yeah.
right, dropped by, what did you say, 7 or 8 million subs? 6 or 7 million subs.
6.3 million
Yeah.
and minus 7%, right? Which is taking you guys in terms of the penetration below 40. So I think that's a big plus already for
Compared to
Canal.
the US, yeah, I mean, when you consider that the pay TV ecosystem, you're right, in the US is around 40% penetration. To have a positive number year over year is just astronomical.
Yeah, exactly. What's interesting, and we'll dig a bit deeper, but you're seeing that it's tougher in Europe, so it's a mature region for them, and that the growth is mostly coming from a new region that is, Asia and Africa.
Which makes all the sense in the world. When I talk to people about where the opportunity lies on the planet Earth, you look at the territories where there are more younger consumers making more and more money every year. That is Asia and Africa. It
Yeah,
is definitely not Europe.
yeah, exactly. So they're keeping the boat afloat, I would say, in Europe, and they're seeing growth, outside. Now, if you look at revenues, so again, revenues growing. So I only took those two numbers. There's a third that I'll add at the end because I wanted to focus on the revenues from their direct to consumer and wholesale business as a pay TV platform in Europe and Africa. If you add those numbers, it doesn't add up. And the last portion is around 800 million. and it's very much coming from the content side of their business. And so they have Studio Canal, which is a major content powerhouse. They have a massive pan-European footprint and international, but and they have a
So
very
about
deep
$1
library.
billion dollars of this is from that?
There's an
1 billion,
additional.
sorry, 1 billion euros is from that.
Yes,
Note, by the way,
exactly.
note the euro mark, not the dollar mark.
Yeah, it looks weird. But I noticed I noticed how you put everything in dollars, and had to switch it up for me. So thank you for
You're
that.
welcome.
No, but so again here, revenue's growing, across the board. So very positive sign.
What is interesting though is, when it is not proportionate to where the subs are. So the subs that are coming from Europe seem to be a higher average revenue per user just
Well,
based
of course.
on these proportions. And then to take this a step further though, that's what's fascinating about this is, so you have way more subs from Europe, right? You have
Yeah.
a higher revenue per sub in Europe, but then when you look at this number, this is what just took me off guard. Is Asia and Africa are generating basically the same amount of profit,
Yeah.
for Canal, as Europe is.
Yeah. And as you can see, there's a modest improvement in terms of profitability for these guys. So I think this is something they'll have to work on. One of the biggest challenge that they have is these guys rely heavily on content. They produce it, they acquire it. They have very high-end productions. They have a lot of output deals for first pay TV windows. They buy a lot of
They have a lot of
tier
Oscar
one sports.
nominations and wins over the years.
So yeah, exactly. And tier one, they have F1 exclusively
Right.
in France. They have the Premier League, etc. So the challenge, of course, is it is not decreasing. Everything is positive, but it's kind of tiny. So it feels like
Incremental, yeah.
a very tricky balance.
How is their evolution to digital? I mean, you talked about it a little bit. It sounds like they do somewhere around their direct to consumer and sales, content sales business, you said is somewhere around €1 billion, between 800 and €1 billion.
So the content business, I will put it aside because in here what's important is the portion of D2C subs and the portion of wholesale subs, right? And what we've seen is that them going D2C, they grew by almost 2% year on year. Wholesale went down 2.4%. Why does that matter? I think it means that the way I read this is that they've gone through, a massive push on connected TVs because historically, it's a bit like Sky. They had their own devices, they had their own ecosystem, but they were also available within other pay TV platforms from, Orange, all of the big guys on the French market and beyond. And they've been making that push to streaming and digital for years, so much so that there's a bit of a question mark, legally speaking, in France as to their status.
Hmm.
And it has an impact because depending on if you are one or the other, you're paying 10% of VAT or 20% of VAT, and more. My canal is such a big super aggregator. You have their channels, but you have Netflix and you have HBO. You have so much going on in there that their status is very much in
It-
in between
It's
in between
as
the
seen
two.
as anti-competitive is what you're saying.
Well, it's not so much that, but the rules are the rules. You're
Right.
supposed to be this one thing, but
And now
because
now
everything is
you're this new
changing,
thing. So they have to
you're
basically
exactly.
redefine legally who they are.
Exactly, you're very
But
hybrid, etc. So there's a lot of work to redefine. But so, like, just to finish on that point, they've made a lot of moves to make sure that their My Canal app was available, as widely as possible. So part of those last few months on new Samsung TV models, you didn't have Canal Plus. So we were all wondering what was going on. They just finalized the deal. They signed a deal with iSense. They got a button. So they've invested a lot to make sure that they're, device agnostic, platform agnostic as much as possible.
So you feel like they have a track to transform. Is that was part of the design to transform for this new age? Was that the impetus behind them spinning out of Vivendi and becoming their own publicly traded company to get more access to public capital? Was that the reason for that?
So that's super interesting about the spin-off because it's not going as planned. Essentially, Vivendi splits in four companies. You have Vivendi, you have Canal Plus, Havas, which is advertising, and then you have Hachette, which is publishing, and there you have Prisma, which is the French Condé Nast. And essentially, everyone is trading way down to the
Below
numbers
the
that
initial
were,
value. If you look at yeah, everybody is now, you could I track it from my map to a certain extent, especially for Canal Plus and
we've seen
for
it.
Vivendi. Yeah, the total aggregate is down. So I guess that does throw a monkey wrench into their plans to really put money and invest into transforming. Yeah.
Yeah, well, so I think what it says, and that's interesting when you look at those numbers, is that the market is not sold on their
On the
business.
concept.
Yeah, on the plans. I think it's also we're finishing Q1. You know, there's a bit of a question mark of what's going to happen next, and so it's a bit of then a wait and see. But they did say in the latest earnings that they were expecting, limited growth this year. So, and we're seeing content
Well, so
costs that
these are very mature companies that decided to
yeah,
well, this is a very mature company, but all of the companies inside Vivendi are very mature businesses that decided to split. And that's actually kind of
yeah,
ties to the my choice of case study,
yeah,
which
exactly.
is
That's why
Comcast.
I didn't choose it on purpose,
I know, we
but
do
that's
this to
very
each other is
interesting.
we
Yeah,
both decided to choose a company and they really do seg, incredibly well. Comcast is a very mature company. They are a lot like Canal Plus in that they have a film studio, they have networks, they have
yeah.
distribution, and they rely very heavily on the subscription business. I think a little differently from Canal Plus is a big part of their business is broadband distribution.
Yeah, yeah, no, Canal Plus, it's an MVPD, huh, if I need to look for a term that is consistent with the US market.
Right,
Yeah,
is a multi-video programming, distributor.
yeah,
Comcast, their broadband business is the kind of it's the lion's share of their business, and it is the backbone of what fueled, all of their growth. NBC has been doing well, but the growth of Comcast and the ability to run that business at a very high margin, is one of the reasons why they've been able to be so successful over the years, and when you look at their 4th quarter earnings, what you see is their revenue and their profit are flat, basically
mm,
under 2%, I always categorize as yellow to basically flatlining. More
yeah,
troubling for them, and this is something that is facing the entire US ecosystem, their total relationships dropped by 1%. You're talking about a company with 30 million plus relationships. So that's
yeah,
meaningful. Their broadband customers dropped even greater. That's the real troubling thing for Comcast. They lost 1.3% of their broadband customers, which is their biggest chunk of customers. So they have plateaued for broadband distribution. Their video homes, as you said, famously are dropping like a
yeah,
hot knife through, warm butter, right? Wireless for them and for Charter, their brethren in MVPDism and in broadband distribution, that is the bright spot for them. But it is not necessarily, counteracting all this negative growth in these other areas. When you look at their media business, which is in particular NBC, Universal, Universal Pictures, their cable operation, and Peacock, first of all, you can see that the profit in connectivity, which is broadband and television and phone, went up by almost 3%. Media revenue went up by 3.5%. Again, against overall revenue, that's a good story. Their studios revenue and their studios profit were up really, really big. The media enterprises had a huge growth in profit in 4th quarter, but that is the law of small numbers. They are barely profitable, and so
yeah.
they just a little bit of growth created all the momentum for them there. But here's where I really want to concentrate on what's going to happen to Comcast post spin. So this is how everything breaks down. Yes, media had some nice growth, but it's still less than a quarter of the overall revenue. Connectivity is close to 60% of their overall revenue. You can see where parks and studio lie. When you look at where SpinCo, so they're about to spin out MSNBC and CNBC and USA and a bunch of other small cable networks into this SpinCo, non-sporting
Yeah.
SpinCo. And you can see they represent around 7.4% of overall revenues. But when you look at their profit, it's around 1% of their profit.
Mm,
And so, this is it has a decent amount of revenue because it generates advertising revenue, it generates affiliate revenue from the other MVPDs that distribute the cable companies and the broadcast network. But remember, you're now separating the teeny little cable networks from the major broadcast network and their biggest cable network, Bravo and Peacock. Yes, the revenues are kind of there, but the margins on that business are
yeah.
not great. And so, to be honest with you, that really does trouble me when you think about the future of Spinco, or as unfortunately some people in the business are calling Shitco.
Mm,
When you look at this slide in particular, this is why not only are they just a fraction of the profit, so the margins are very thin, but what are their prospects? Where is the growth going to come from for this business? Because you're severing off the most popular of all of their programming brands in
mm,
cable. You're severing off sports, the Olympics.
mm,
You're severing off the studio business, and you're severing off the ability to plug into their new version of pay TV.
yeah.
Meanwhile, by the way, on the cable side of the business, broadband is plateaued and the growth isn't
Yeah.
coming there. So I worry about both pieces, and I feel like this split is a tactic in search of a strategy.
So yeah, my question, because when I look at that, I don't see how these guys will be better off. So what did they say they would be doing with this thing? When you mean they spin it off, it's a standalone company. That company won't be publicly traded, or it's
It
gonna
will be.
be
It's going to be its own public.
okay.
They're going to have the Canal
Okay,
Plus.
so just like Canal
Probably.
Plus, it
Yeah.
will be okay. Do we know how much it is valued? Because going back to what we said at the top, when
Last I
Vivendi was
heard,
making, yeah.
yeah, last I heard it was in the $6 to $8 billion range.
Okay, so we can take bets, right? That it's gonna be half that. No, but honestly, when you look at Vivendi, it's a perfect example, and we'll put it in our different newsletters, because I have the actual numbers of how much Vivendi expected and where the valuation is today for those four companies, and actually what people are saying. And so I don't know if this could relate to Comcast here, but behind Vivendi, there's a family,
Yeah.
Bolloré. Maybe it's the Murdochs, the French Murdochs. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
I would have to dig a bit deeper. But essentially, people are also saying that it's a move from that family, which is the biggest shareholder of the group and all of those different pieces,
Yeah.
and it's a way for them to actually buy at a lower price more share, and therefore be done to the detriment of the minority shareholders.
You
So I
think
don't
that's
know
you
exactly
think
how
that's the
Comcast.
case with the it's a very
I
similar
don't know.
situation, which is this is the Philadelphia version of this, the Roberts,
Okay.
which controls a
So there's the family.
sizable chunk
Okay.
of this company. Not, I think, as large as the family does in Canal Plus, but a reasonably large. Brian
Okay.
Roberts, Ralph Roberts' son, is now running it. Very famous nepo baby. So it could be that I just see this split. I believe you're right. I believe it will hamper both. So right now, Comcast is worth around, let's call it $140 billion. Spinco will be worth, let's say, around, let's just call it, for round numbers, 10 billion. It won't be worth that, but let's
Okay.
call it 10
Mm.
billion, which leaves Comcast proper should be worth around, let's call it 120. You're right. I think as a result, this will lay bare some of the major issues at the center of both halves of this company, or it's not halves, but both sections of this company, which is broadband ain't what it used to be. That major profit center that Comcast has been relying on to build the second tower in Philadelphia called the
Mm.
Innovation Tower, which has produced almost no innovation since it was built. is in real trouble. This business is in real trouble. And the conversion to digital with Peacock is not at the rate of even its competitors in the field. When you look at Disco Brothers, and they're at 100 plus million subscribers, and you look at Paramount, who is, I think, very close to 100 million subscribers, and then you look at Peacock, I don't know, they're in the 40s, right?
Yeah.
Ish. um, it doesn't look like their transformation is going. And Zumo, while I understand the thesis behind it, it has not yet hit the stride that I think
Mm.
they thought it would by this point. So I don't see the growth coming from the biggest part of the mother the company, and then the SpinCo again. You're divorcing it from the very things it needs to grow, which is the streaming business, and in most particular fashion, sports and news, which it needs, I think, to thrive.
I did not understand that. I thought it was just cable, and I thought that they would keep Peacock. So Peacock is in that SpinCo.
Peacock is in the mothership, is in Comcast. SpinCo is, as I
Okay.
understand it, USA, MSNBC, CNBC, all the collection of
So just
those.
the cable networks.
Right.
Okay. And so Sky, I'm assuming Sky, which is
I believe
the
Sky is it
is in the
remains with the
mothership, huh?
mothership, yeah.
Mm.
But Sky
Especially
just
because
reported not
oh,
great numbers itself very recently. So, this is not there. I don't know. Peacock would be considered the growth part of the business. Actually, if you look at the numbers in particular over the last couple of years, you can see actually media, but that is primarily this number here in media is Peacock going profitable and sports, the Olympics. This was an Olympics
yeah.
year. So your SpinCo doesn't get any of that. SpinCo doesn't touch the studio. SpinCo doesn't touch parks, which had a
Mm.
bad quarter in fourth quarter, but has also been a growth sector for them. It doesn't get to touch connectivity. So it's divorced from all the things that are truly growing. But then even when you look at, Mama Ship, um, look at their total relationships and broadband customers,
Yeah.
and then look at what percentage of revenues and profits that part of the
Yeah,
business
yeah. If
generates. It's not growing.
yeah, you don't want to put all your eggs in that connectivity basket, is what you're saying. And so I've been thinking about Peacock last year. Those numbers out of can you go back to the revenue slide?
Yeah, hold on one second.
How much are we talking about on the media piece? How much does Peacock represent in there?
It's
Do
a
you
good
know?
question. I think Peacock is in the $4 to $5 billion on total revenues.
Okay.
So I think it's a sizable chunk. But of the EBITDA, they have been a drain on the media
Mm,
EBITDA. So
yeah.
Peacock has been unprofitable, and I don't think it's reported profitable in fourth quarter. I could be wrong about that. Hold on one second. So in fourth quarter, Peacock still lost money, but it lost a lot less money, which is
Less.
why
Okay.
the media profit grew as high as it did. It will
Okay.
Peacock will probably turn profitable at some point in 2025, but it's still going to be a relatively small contributing factor. Overall revenue, it's generating real revenue, but it is still not profitable. And then you think about the exclusive football games that they've put on Peacock, and it begins to explain why Peacock is not nearly, and by the way, how
Mm,
far behind Peacock is in this total subscriber race.
yeah.
It all begins to add up. So, ultimately, I I think, Canal Plus has some advantages in that they still are holding on to subscribers in a way that Comcast isn't across all of their businesses, except
Yeah.
they are probably a little bit further out on their direct to consumer business. But I think in both cases, these are companies who I think 2025 is gonna be a pivotal year in their transformation, and I think the spin in both cases winds up becoming a very questionable
I agree.
decision in the livelihood and thrivelihood of these 2 companies in this new user-centric era.
What I will say, what is kind of shocking, and I will say that when Comcast bought Sky, that was their attempt at going outside. Why is Peacock not in the race? They're only in the U.S., right? So this is the size of the
Right.
playground, huh?
Well, Comcast has
Uh,
historically come to streaming. I mean, they dabbled in streaming with me and then fired my ass. and then they got to streaming last of all the major players, and
Yeah,
then they really have pussyfooted around with the strategy in streaming itself. And so and it's very fragmented within the company of Zumo and Peacock, and how do these things all work together? So it'll be, and by the way, here's my most frustrating thing for Comcast writ large. They've never really, until recently, and even now, they're just barely testing it out, a virtual MVPD. You
yeah,
can,
it's true.
even
Yeah,
compared to Charter and Spectrum and DirecTV and Sling, they're way, way, way behind
yeah,
on
yeah.
this, and I don't understand it. Anyway,
So that's where I'm super. I think it's going to be a tough year for Canal, but I think they have more to themselves in that. One of the things with the Spinco is also, the world is their oysters, so to say, and they can go and grow globally. Yeah? And they've grown through taking, shares in Viaplay in the Nordics, View in Asia. They have almost 50% of multi-choice, and they've reached that moment where they actually need to buy the entire company, which would bring an additional 15 million subs in Africa. And multi-choice, it's both, French speaking, English speaking, and it's a massive player in the
well, and
ecosystem.
and
So
and when you look at their numbers, when you look at these numbers in particular, what I would say if they were ask me for strategic help, which they're not,
yeah,
because 'cause they're French and I'm not,
and
I
they
would
would
say
ask me, not you.
right,
Get
exactly.
off
Well,
my
then you
turf,
should tell
man.
them, go hard in
Yeah,
Asia and Africa, because
yeah. This
yeah,
is what they're
while it is
doing.
a
I don't
higher
think they need
revenue
us
per
to tell.
user
Yeah,
in Europe, it is equally profitable, and that's where the growth will come from. And that's a good lesson for everybody out there is look beyond the edge of your own desk of experience.
yeah,
Africa and Asia and Latin America are really good growth sectors, I believe, over the
yeah.
next couple of years, if you can manage to be there. Anyway, this was fascinating for me.
I love it. We got to do that more. So this is the end of this first quarter for the Media Odyssey. In Q2, we'll have some more numbers to chew on. We'll do more of these. So tell us, wherever, whenever you get to talk to us, tell us if you like those, yes or
Yeah,
no.
and if there's a company you want us to dig into, tell us that too.
Oh, that's a good idea, actually. Yeah, throw us a bone, and we'll happily dig into the data. Well, that was awesome. Thank you, Evan. Thank you so much. I know how to say Canal Plus now.
Canal Plus. That is Marion Ranchet,
This is Evan Shapiro.
and thanks for listening to or watching the Media Odyssey. See you next time.